We are in section number 47, moving on to this section now, the healing of the centurion's servant. And this is one of my favorite examples of somebody getting saved in the New Testament, in the life of Christ, for very special reasons. We're looking at question number 320, and it reads, as a Gentile, how did the centurion show ethnic sensitivity in his approach to Christ? It's based on Luke chapter 7, verses 3, 6, 9, and 10. It says, and when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. Then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turned him about, and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And they that were sent, returning to the house, found the servant whole that had been sick. And so the answer is going to be A, he spoke to him through the Jewish elders and then through his friends. Now, the passage in Luke chapter number 7, and Matthew chapter 8 are different in that when Matthew is writing, it looks as though the centurion is carrying on a conversation directly with Christ. But when Luke records it, you see that he's actually doing it through his friends. So Luke adds on that extra detail. Don't know exactly why it would be more likely in one than another to include that. But perhaps Luke would be including this because his audience being a Gentile audience, he might have been more sensitive to the fact that they would wonder about him speaking to Jesus as a Jew speaking to Gentiles, and so he included that here. Certainly, Matthew could have included it for the similar reason in order to point out to his Jewish audience that the centurion did not speak directly. But I think later on when we see that when Christ is saying that he had not found so great faith in all of Israel, and that the children of the kingdom are going to be sitting down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, maybe what Matthew would be pointing out is how that there was should be a greater closeness between Jew and Gentile. He might have left out that aspect of the intermediaries specifically to emphasize that the Gentiles would be with the Jews. Okay. B is not a good answer. He came to him secretly at night. He was not like Nicodemus. The centurion was much more bold. Even though he was sensitive to Jewish sensibilities, he didn't approach Jesus directly, but he was not like Nicodemus. Nicodemus came under the cover of darkness, and it could possibly be said that Nicodemus was concerned what his other Jewish friends might be thinking, other Jewish leaders might be thinking, but this was not the centurion. The centurion had a sense of boldness that was based on his faith that he was willing to place in Christ, which we'll see described a little bit later on. C, he sent him money to pay for the healing. Well, no, it's not like he tried to sweeten the pot to make it so that Jesus would want to come out to do the healing. Not that that's actually necessarily a bad thing to do. Okay, in one sense, to offer to pay for services can be very respectful. I'll often have someone not associated with how I generally operate, and they will inquire how much I charge for doing a wedding or a funeral. Well, I'm always gracious when they give a gift to show their appreciation later, but I always let them know, no, there's no charge. You see, I'm happy to preach for free, especially when there are more people to attend because of the occasion. Another reason is because I don't want to ever give the impression that I could be bought off in order to perform a wedding that I don't think should be performed. For instance, I won't do a wedding for a couple where one or both are not saved. And so we don't go to just receive money to do things. Well, by coming to the Lord on Jesus' terms of healing people openly and freely, the centurion was actually acting more in accord with an appreciation for what Jesus was all about. Perhaps he was aware of Jesus going about and healing, and it was not understood that he was doing any of it for any fees, and so he was really acting in accord with what Jesus was like. The right answer, of course, Luke indicates the exact manner in which the centurion came to Christ. First, he approached him through the elders, and then through his friends. Question number 321 says, how had the centurion demonstrated his respect for the God of Israel? He did something to demonstrate that he had a respect for the God of Israel. And it's based on Matthew 7. Try again. Luke 7, verses 3 to 4. When he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servants. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him instantly, saying that he was worthy of him, worthy for whom he should do this, for he loveth our nation, and he hath built for us a synagogue. So the answer is B. He had generously funded the building of a synagogue. If you look at C, he became a proselyte. Well, we actually don't know whether he became a proselyte. Certainly he was favorable towards the Jews, but it does not say that he became a proselyte or not. This is not out of the realm of possibility, because it was not uncommon in that day, especially in the diaspora, where the Jews had been dispersed across the Assyrian and then the Babylonian kingdoms, and then they had continued on through the Persian kingdom and then others to follow. You saw that the Jews, having been dispersed throughout the various empires, there were those who heard and understood the Jewish faith that was from the Scriptures, and they converted over and became proselytes. We just don't know that the centurion did this. If he had, it would have been very consistent with the situation. But we at least know that he had this favorability towards Judaism. On A, some of his best friends were Jewish. Now, that's a reflection of a common issue for today. Back then, if he had said that, some of my best friends were Jewish, today that would be understood to be kind of a form of racism that you're just not even aware of. You can't really tell your bigotry, because it's like, well, I can't be bigoted because some of my best friends are of such and such an ethnic group. Well, this is absolutely ridiculous as an indicator of racism. It could be just that you have friends that are that way, and you're not letting anything get in the way. Certainly when there was a problem here in America in the Deep South with racist attitudes, you didn't just have friends who were black or white or whatever. They had an active animus towards each other. Such an accusation reveals that people who made the accusation are not interested in anything that you have to say. If they say, well, you are just unconscious of your racism, for them, it doesn't matter what you say. To them, everything is racist. Now, there is a significance for stereotyping. Stereotyping people has some limitations that are impossible to avoid. Our brains naturally recognize patterns that would be ill-advised to ignore. If you go to a dangerous area and you see people that are dressed as thugs and criminals might be dressed, it would be a good idea to say, well, I think I'm going to stereotype and profile here. I don't think I'm going to take a chance. Now, the idea of stereotyping should be far from absolute. We shouldn't say, well, all of such and such a group is this way, but neither are the stereotypes to be ignored. They're not always insignificant. Extreme interpretation of our observations of people will likely push us into the realm of having a they're all that way kind of mentality, which would be improper. Funding the building of a synagogue by itself is actually not sufficient proof that the centurion was not a bigot. However, it's hard to imagine that when people are so invested in others, it's so hard to imagine that they don't have an affinity for them. Investing ourselves in different kinds of friends while recognizing social stereotypes is not necessarily bad as long as extremes are avoided. Sometimes those who are the most solicitous towards different ethnicities actually don't realize how patronizing their attitude might be. I remember a setting where Candace Owens was talking to a reporter who was trying to be sensitive, and she was asking her questions essentially based upon her black experience. And Candace Owens tried to say that, there's a kind of a prejudice that liberals might have towards us without even realizing it. And the reporter was like, the interviewer was taken aback. Well, how is that possible? And Candace Owens said, well, the only reason you're asking me this question is because I'm black. Okay, that's your reason. So this reporter, by being, as I said, overly solicitous, overly whatever, ended up looking patronizing. Well, I'll ask you because you're black. Why wouldn't that reporter just ask that of anybody? She said specifically because as a black person, she was asking that way. So they don't realize that could be a problem attitude in and of itself. They don't realize that their special attention to somebody could look like it's only due to the fact that the person is of a different ethnic group. Treating someone special who's of a different ethnic group could easily be done while masking one's true thoughts, though, so you've got to be careful. Okay, if you look at B, again, he had generously funded the building of a synagogue. Our investment in each other should not be diminished, however. When you put yourself into something, it is significant, whether it was the centurion building the synagogue or the investment that we placed in each other. Building the synagogue was consistent with the centurion's later attitude towards Christ. You see, as we go to make an investment of ourselves into each other or into something, it should carry a little bit of extra weight. This is why the tithe is actually an important factor. We tend to value something that we have actually invested in. Anybody can say, oh, well, I'm all for you. But there's something about taking that money and then paying for something and putting physical money into something or physical effort into something that makes it more real to a person. It's not just talk. It represents hard work that somebody has done in order to make those finances available. Now, we're not supposed to be favoring those who give and those who don't give and those who can't give or those who give less. But we don't want to forget the fact that when people are giving, even if somebody does come with a problem attitude, it still takes something on their part to commit themselves financially in something. And we shouldn't ignore that completely and then just do them despite because of maybe some problem. No, it means that we want to take a little extra effort because that person had taken some extra effort themselves to invest themselves. Now, while we caution people not to do good works for salvation, we should also recognize that part of their attitude is due to a desire to please God, and there can be a fine line there. Is somebody investing themselves because they are trying to get saved, or are they investing themselves because they care for God? So when somebody is investing themselves, we might want to encourage them to examine their hearts and ask, well, why am I doing this? If they find they're doing it for salvation, that would be a problem. Now, in this case, evidently the Jews were thinking in terms of deserving something when they brought this to Jesus. But Jesus is going to be more impressed with the selflessness that we're going to mention in this next question, the selflessness of the centurion that's revealed in his attitude. So the Jews might have been thinking of those terms. The centurion was not. Okay, question number 322. In what way did the centurion show that he understood what faith was? And this is based on Luke 7, 6-9. It says, Then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. Wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee, but say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. For I also am a man under authority. Here's a significant part. Having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, Go, and he goeth, and to another, Come, and he cometh, and to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turned him about, and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. Well, the fact that Jesus found such great faith in him and had not seen it elsewhere is what sets him apart. What is it about this obedience, this sense of obedience, that accompanies faith, being the essence of faith? We know it's not obedience that says, I am going to pay for my salvation by doing good works, but there's something in here that is manifesting the centurion's attitude. So the answer is B. As a centurion, he understood what submission was and was willing to recognize Christ's authority. You see, the centurion was a military man. He was in charge of 100 men. He understood the submission that accompanies discipline. The discipline he experienced went beyond self-discipline, though. You see, self-discipline could actually lead to pride, where someone is tempted to trust in themselves, whether for salvation or maybe to not need God. The idea would be the emphasis on self, like, I have it in me, it's all based on me and my adherence to a code or my adherence to the law. Well, being in the military, the centurion would have been required to submit himself to the discipline of those who were over him. So it went beyond his own self-discipline as a military man to a discipline to be submissive to somebody else. Because of this, he would have had an expanded concept of discipline. True faith requires the abandonment of self and submission to God, because faith is more than believing that God exists. It's also trusting in him with your life. You see, we start off with a head knowledge, but then comes that heart knowledge that applies ourselves and commits ourselves and submits ourselves to Jesus Christ. There are several words in Greek for faith, and one of them has the idea of not just simple faith, which can save a person, but the word brings out the idea of that committing of oneself to doing something about believing and turning to Christ. Option A says he worked hard at keeping the 10 Commandments. Well, this refers to how people might depend on their self-discipline, the emphasis on self, to perform good works to get them to heaven. No matter how much discipline we exercise to behave, it will, of course, not be sufficient to pay for our sinfulness. One can be submitted to the law without submitting themselves to God. It's very possible. C, he studied many religions and felt that Judaism was the most useful. Okay, that's not an indicator of what kind of faith he had. See, the centurion did not do as many today might do, shopping around for a religion that suited his way of life and philosophy. I've actually had people say that to me, that they like such and such a church, a kind of church, such and such kind of cult even, because they feel comfortable in it because it matches what they would like to do. It's like giving a sitting dog a command to sit and then praising him for his obedience. There's no real submission when you conform to a system that you have conformed to match your own character. Instead of looking for a religion based on how useful it was, the centurion submitted himself for the use of God. So looking for something that matches self, he wanted to make self match God. Question 323 says, what did Jesus think about the future of religion? And now Matthew includes this and Luke does not. In Matthew chapter 8, in Matthew chapter 8, verses 10 to 12, we read, when Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to them that followed, verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And I say unto you that many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, first let's look at B. The Gentiles would replace Israel. No, that was something that was never in view in the Scripture. And that is one of the views that's out there today, that somehow the Jews lost their opportunity, they've been set aside, and now the Gentiles in the church have been raised up to take the place of Israel. Now, A is the opposite of that. Okay, Jesus did not think that the Gentiles would replace Israel, but neither did he think that the Jews were going to maintain an exclusive religion. Because of the attitudes in that day, because of Phariseeism, there was a desire for a sense of purity for Israel, and so they would think that the Gentiles were unclean. I always have trouble understanding why they would accept them as proselytes, though, but they would consider the Gentiles in their culture to be unclean. And so they would have looked to make Judaism still exclusive in keeping the Gentiles out. Now, one of the things that came about in the early church when they went out on evangelism, the early church, as it was split up and they went out abroad, there was a time when the Apostle Peter was given a vision and he was told not to call unclean that which God had cleansed, and that the Gentiles were to be freely accepted on faith, just on their faith alone, in order to be part of the church. And so as he met with another centurion at that time, Cornelius, he found that Cornelius and company, they were given the Holy Spirit, and they received the Holy Spirit in the same way that had been evidenced on Pentecost. And so they spoke with other tongues, again, tongues that were literal human languages, but they did this, which was a sign to the Jews of one of the claims of the gospel. This particular claim of the gospel is that the Gentiles should come in without any further burdening of becoming Jews first, of going through Jewish rituals first, in order to be part of the church. They were to be accepted simply based on their baptism alone into the church, because they were baptized immediately. And so none of the Jewish ritual, circumcision, or anything else was required, just simple faith. And so the Jews would not, Jesus was not pointing out how the Jews would be maintaining an exclusive religion. When you look at the fact that the Jews had accepted had accepted the centurion, it might be because he had benefited the Jews, and so they were not quick to shun him because he was a Gentile. So let's look at C, the right answer. The Gentiles would be part of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus used the opportunity of the centurion's faith to point out the ultimate purpose of the Jews, which was the salvation of Israel. By pointing out the inclusion of the Gentiles, Jesus was only presenting to the Jews what they should have known. They understood from the prophecies that they were going to be a blessing to the Gentiles. They should have had a clue. Now, here and in perhaps the woman at the well also, dealing with the woman at the well and talking about the Good Samaritan, Jesus was addressing from time to time the Jews' limited perspective, and he was using this to challenge them. And what a perfect example. The centurion had the greatest faith because he had the greatest and clearest sense of understanding of committing oneself to Christ and submitting oneself to Christ and getting over self. And so by pointing this out to them, he's saying there's been not such great faith found in all of Israel. So what Jesus was doing was using this opportunity to bring this out to them and to try to open up their minds and their hearts and their understanding. Okay, that brings us to the end of question 323. We're going to stop with that for now. I like to keep our attention focused. We certainly could go on a little bit further, but I think that the centurion just deserves such an examination all by himself, because I think he's, again, as I said earlier, one of the greatest examples of faith and saving faith in the life of Christ.